Her many voices, her many voices, her many voices, her many voices.
Welcome everyone to another session of Her Many Voices Lunch and Learn. And today we have both Lisa Wimberger, our guest, and founder of Her Many Voices, Alicia Fall. Welcome to you both.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thanks, Myrna. Lisa, it is so good to see you, honey.
You too.
So many years. We go back, Myrna, what, Lisa? 20 years now.
2004, the end of 2004.
Okay.
That's
Almost
awesome.
20 years. Yeah. Lisa and I, we played music together. She was my percussionist for, I don't know, close to 10 years.
I see the fantastic trap set there.
She and her husband are amazing drummers, percussionists. So
it was a serendipitous party we were at. We were at a holiday party.
Oh, that's right.
And you were playing guitar, and at the end you said, "I need a conga player." And then my friend said, "She's one." And that was it.
That was it.
It's really wonderful.
That was it.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on the show. You know, it's been so years ago, Myrna, we started a program. It was called the Refugee Ambassador Program. And Lisa did these trainings we picked 11 women. They were handpicked, international, and they were focused within their own communities on trauma and PTSD and just the everyday issues that folks go through, particularly those within people of color communities. And so Lisa did a training, and some of them, they went through a couple of weekends worth of training, and then some of them went through the entire year of training to get their certification for neurosculpting. And then they were able to go out back into their communities and take what they learned within Lisa's trainings and go back into their communities and work with them. But it's been a while. It's definitely been way too long. And I thought all that's going on in the world today, we certainly are in this place where we need to get back and get grounded and recognize the abilities that we have within ourselves to deal with all of the traumas that we're dealing with, the depressions that people are going through. You know, it goes beyond the span of this 2-year pandemic. It definitely goes a lot further than that. There's all sorts of layers that humanity is going through at this point. So I thought this is perfect timing. Let's bring Lisa back in here. Let's do a lunch and learn. And so, Liz, thank you for saying yes to this.
Yeah,
I know that you are quite busy at this point.
It's okay. I'm always a yes to you. I'm always a yes to Her Many Voices. And just a quick update, one of those people who was in that original program is still a certified facilitator, and she has been adapting programs for various reservations, the Crow Reservation, and she has been actively helping women find their voice. And it goes back to that very first program that you and I did together.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. It does my heart good.
Yes.
Because you don't know. I mean, sometimes you just, all right, people go through this period and then they go off and, you know, you hope for the best and you don't know whether they're going to use the tools that they were
still
given.
Making ripples, ripples.
Good. All right. Well,
that's amazing.
I don't want to hog up your time because I'll run my mouth. Myrna, it's all yours. Lisa, if at the end of this, if you can hang out for a couple of minutes, let's talk.
Yes, I can, and I will.
All right, ladies.
Okay.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much. Lisa, I'm so excited about this conversation. It's so important to think about the brain and our minds. It's like really kind of boiling down to the most essential element of what's important in life, right?
Amen. Amen to that.
I certainly know it's your life work. Please introduce yourself around your career. And also, I'd love to hear how you personally got involved in this kind of work.
Yeah. So I run the Neurosculpting Institute. It's a modality that I created It's a meditation / neuroplasticity training modality designed for everybody, but very specifically, it supports people in stress and trauma to kind of take agency over their nervous system and to stop habituating to stress patterns, which can snowball and just overtake our lives. So it's an empowerment process for people to gain access to their nervous system and start self-directing the way they want to show up in life. Everything from stress and PTSD all the way to, the self-help enthusiast, the person just really interested in self-growth, all the way to people with chronic illness. And how I got involved in it was that I am a trauma survivor, which I find that a lot of people who overcome their trauma go on to share how they did that. And that's what I did. I had a seizure disorder that came from a traumatic incident when I was young and compounded over the years. And my seizures were life-threatening. And I was ending up in the ER, and I was flatlining, and I was, going into bradycardia, which is where your heart rate drops very quickly. And then eventually my heart would stop. And it was getting harder and harder to recover from these episodes. And
How old were you when that was happening?
It started when I was 15, and I overcame the disorder in 2007. So 30 years of having these seizures.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And not really knowing what or why, knowing I was not epileptic. I didn't have an epilepsy diagnosis. I had brain scans, I had heart scans, everything came back normal. And then I had a doctor who I just serendipitously happened to have a seizure in his office during an exam. And when I woke up, he was shaking, and he had a needle of atropine, which was he was going to put it into my heart, like that Pulp Fiction scene, and he was going to resuscitate me. And I was very confused, and he was shaken. And that's where I got my diagnosis. That's where I first learned that everything I had been experiencing in these, up to that point had been these seizures, because I would wake up on the floor in a puddle of what was a combination of sweat and urine and have no idea what happened to me.
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
he finally gave it a name. And he said, you had a seizure and you flatlined, and we were about to resuscitate you. And that's when we discovered, what was happening. I wasn't epileptic. It was my vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve that is in charge of one of your stress responses. And it governs your heart and your lungs and your liver and your gut and all of the organs, but it predominantly affects your heart rate variability and your breathing. And when it's not happy, it's going to move into supreme protection phase, and that will decelerate your heart to something very low, so you cannot maintain conscious functioning, or it will stop your heart completely, which is the worst case scenario. And that's what was happening with me.
What is that diagnosis? What's it called? The diagnosis?
Vasovagal syncope, which is a very fancy way to say fainting spells due to your vagus nerve, but there's a spectrum. And that spectrum in its extreme is the play dead option. It's the self-protective play dead option that mammals have. Humans have it too. It's not sustainable, because when you don't have enough oxygen to the brain as a mammal with a large brain, you're in big trouble. A mammal with a small brain, like a bird, a squirrel, they can sustain the play dead option. That's why it's, play possum. They can sustain it. It's protective.
Wow.
Large mammals, not so good. And so I really just had to understand what was going on with my nervous system. I studied all sorts of different courses in neuroscience to get a handle on me. Had zero intention to share this with anybody or make a business or create an institute. I just needed to save my life, because at the time, that they were their worst, I was a single mother, and I feared that I would leave my daughter without a mother. And I could not stomach that. Up to that point, it was just me, and it was annoying, but so what? Now I had a kid. So I had to figure this out. And so I created a neuroplasticity protocol based on what I was learning. And that protocol enabled me to hack in. I know the word hack is a little harsh, but to influence my nervous system patterning, unwind the old habituated patterns, the old pattern of seizure response to stress, and orient to a new pattern that I could practice enough where it would become habitual, and that would be my new norm. And that happened. It actually happened. I created this protocol. It worked on me. And at that point, I thought, I just got a second lease on life. And now I have to consecrate myself to this modality. And so I did, and I quit my job and started sharing it with the world. And that was around the time that Alicia and I were just really getting going in our friendship and our musicianship. And that's how it all started.
I'd love for you to connect one little dot, which is, how did you really find the solution and know that it was yours? Was it really your own research into the brain, and you ended up finding the key, and then you created your own program with neurosculpting around that key?
Yes. So I was a meditator. Meditation was not helpful for a vasovagal seizure disorder. It's just not. You have to get active and embodied and somewhat aroused to overcome a freeze disorder, not calm down. So traditional meditation was actually antithetical to my healing when it comes to freeze and dissociation, which was what I was doing. What I learned through neuroscience were the principles of neuroplasticity. And so what I did was I looked at my meditation practice and I said, my heart of hearts knows meditation can heal me, but something's wrong with the process. Something's not applying to my condition. And so I used the principles of neuroplastic learning in the brain. And I looked at meditation and I found a whole bunch of steps missing, pieces of meditation process missing that could actually activate the learning parts of the brain and activate just enough arousal and not too much calm so that my brain would be ripe for learning. And then because I was learning the principles of learning, I was then able to create a bunch of steps where now that I had my brain listening and compliant, I could teach it very efficiently, quickly, powerfully. I didn't have time to waste. I didn't have 10 hours to go to the mountaintop. I had no time, and I had to get in there pragmatically, efficiently, and potently. And so I created steps of a meditation process that I had never learned from anyone else. I still haven't experienced these steps in any other meditation form. I created them, I put them together, I sequenced them, I played with them, I rearranged them. And when I found a sequencing that felt right, I practiced it for about 8 months. And then when that wave of seizure actually came after about 8 months of me practicing my protocol, I was able to interrupt and stop the seizure by activating the rehearsal script I had been practicing for 8 months. And so at that point, I knew I entrained this. This is my new default. And so, no, I did not learn those 5 steps anywhere else. Yeah.
That's really incredible, Lisa. And the fact that, I've known of your work for a long time. And I think initially it was actually because of that ambassador program I became aware of you back in the day. But this is so incredible to think that there's lots of people meditate, of course, right? But for there to be a piece that's missing that could literally change their life, right? That could literally help people understand that if they also include your steps, they can change the way their brain works, right? With the neuroplasticity. I mean, I know the concept of neuroplasticity, right?
100%.
Yeah,
And
that's
here,
really fantastic and sort of a light bulb, you know?
yeah. And, here's what I want to say about meditation. It's amazing. I love it. Yes, it was my lifeline for decades. There is nothing wrong with meditation. I'm trained in TM, I'm trained in Ascension, I'm trained in a bunch of different forms of meditation, and they're amazing. And maybe this is user error, right? This is not a statement to all of you listening about your meditation practice. This is me and mine. Meditation took me to level 1 of being able to interrupt and calm down from agitation. That is not neuroplasticity. That's completely different. That's a calming intervention. In order to change your habituated patterns, you have to understand neuroplasticity, because that's how you created them. And if you don't understand neuroplasticity, which is different from meditation, then you are only at an intervention level. And that intervention level can absolutely get you out of the hardest times of your life, but it will continue to remain an intervention. And so with neuroplasticity, and not just neurosculpting, but other forms of neuroplasticity training out there, you can get underneath and rework the trigger so you no longer need the intervention. And so there's a profound difference between neuroplasticity entrainment practices and traditional no thought, let it go relaxation meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah,
they're not the same animal.
In a way, that's sort of just entry level step 1 to, I mean, I think people just sort of think in general of meditation as a way to get inner peace and contentment, like this place, which is important as well, as you've said.
Critical.
And I absolutely love Michael Singer's work, the Untethered Soul. And he talks about how the voice in your head is actually, it's not you, right? You're the one listening to the voice in your head. And I think I'm transitioning a little bit into the whole consciousness conversation, which is totally relevant here, which is that, the more we are conscious and aware and not driven by our unconscious, right? The healthier we are, the better our behaviors and our own thoughts and our self-talk, all of it. So we're getting to this point. What your work does, it helps people become more conscious in general. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't really know what that means to become more conscious. It's such an esoteric thought. But that's really what it means, is to spend more minutes of your day, let's say, behaving and speaking from the conscious level instead of the unconscious, where our unhealed wounds and our past experiences are actually ruling our behavior and our thoughts. And your work helps to change that. So what I'm hearing you say, and I want to hear more about it, right, is that your work takes you so far beyond this getting to an inner peace place that you also are able to heal those things that are living in your unconscious, that if we don't heal them, continue to drive our lives in unhealthy ways forever, right?
Absolutely. So, most of our behavior is not driven at the conscious level. I'll also replace the word conscious sometimes with self-directed. Our behaviors, as much as our mental mind wants to believe we're choosing them, they are usually expressions of habituated patterns, which are beneath intention level. They're at the I did that a million times level. And so when we're behaving in the world around us, we're often not behaving in the world from a present state. We are behaving presently from rehearsed patterns that we've habituated to, which is different from being really present. And you can calm down all you want in the present moment, but unless you go in with the right tool to discharge the strength of that habituated neural programming, which fires electrically before conscious thought. It's our impulse for behavior in studies is measurably faster than our conscious thought. I want to give you an example of how we think we're conscious, but we're not. And these studies were done and noted in the book Incognito by David Eagleman. And he was referencing the studies on free will. And so they were measuring neural firing, meaning how fast does a neuron network fire its impulse for action? How fast does that happen? Mapped to when do we think we actually are having a conscious thought. So they did a task where they put food in front of people, and they measured when a person registered, cake, I want that cake, versus the speed at which they started firing up their hand motion to move towards the cake. And they were different. The motor impulse to reach for the cake was firing measurably faster than the thought, yum, I want the cake, which led these scientists to hypothesize that our behavior is already happening before we are aware it's happening. So what is it happening from? It's happening from a habituated pattern.
So the impulse is faster than the thought.
Yes.
So the impulse, and which means even behavior, is faster than the thought. That's like such a huge point.
And so neuroplasticity works off efficiency. If you've habituated to reaching for something, that becomes an efficient neural network, which means it's going to fire faster, easier, stronger because you keep using it, and it's going to make itself more efficient. So now anytime there's cake around, you may have that behavioral impulse, which is extremely efficient, to start reaching for it even before you have a desire for it. This is what helps us understand compulsive addiction. And I know better, yet I can't change my behavior. And yes, you can calm down and find inner peace, which is, I think my goal in life is to find inner peace. And I will use other forms of meditation to support me getting there. But I also want to be very self-directed. And in order to be self-directed and feel like I have agency in my own life, sovereignty, free will, empowerment, well, I better understand how neuroplasticity works, because these things are happening before my conscious mind even has a chance.
Wow, that's amazing. Before we talk even more so about solutions, right, and your actual work, could you shed some light on what, just in general for people, what causes these negative things in our unconscious? I mean, I have an idea, childhood wounding and all kinds of things, right? Yeah. But please elucidate on that, please.
So lots and lots of things play into why we might have a negativity bias, right? It's called negativity bias, where we are predisposed to either habituating to the negative or the self-protective response, or the perception that we're threatened out by the world, right? And reason being is, if you think about how is it that our species has stayed alive, the primal impulse to protect ourselves is the only reason, Myrna, you and I are talking right now and people are able to listen, is because our species is predisposed to identifying threat and eradicating it for the preservation of our lives. It is a life-giving, life-affirming gift to have a self-protection negativity bias that is kept in check. That's the key. But it's not kept in check. It's so efficient and so powerful that it perpetuates itself. Therefore, if it perpetuates itself, it becomes our dominant lens. So ultimately, we don't want to vilify negativity. We don't want to vilify our self-protection response or make it wrong or bad to want to protect ourselves against what we perceive as threatening, but we want to contextualize it and reframe it so that we understand what is real threat, which is very minimal in a industrialized society, very minimal threat, versus our perception of threat. And if we can manage that, then we can honor and use negativity bias when it serves the preservation of our lives, and we can drop it in all the other times so we can feel sovereign, free, self-directed peace.
Am I hearing you say that there is a positive aspect to what's living in our unconscious, right? Because it's a self-protection mode that has served us over millennia, right? And that's another sort of light bulb moment for me. That's really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, without it, none of us would be alive.
Yeah. And that goes into fight or flight, right? Fight,
Yes.
flight, or freeze. And
Yes.
so talk about that. People are, I think, generally familiar with that. So how does that play into this?
So we live on a spectrum. Let's pretend calm, peace, ease is right here in the middle. And the spectrum runs, and there's two ends of the spectrum. This end over here might be agitated, fight, flee. And this end over here might be freeze, shut down, right? But this whole spectrum represents our capacity to move along a stress response. When we're in the middle and we're resting and digesting, we feel perfectly healthy and great. And then we have a thought, we have a stress, and we go in one direction or the other. Either we agitate to protect ourselves, or we shut down to protect ourselves. But we're never supposed to be stuck. We're supposed to be able to move along the spectrum from minute to minute, actually. Because if we stayed neutral, we'd never get off the couch and mobilize to do anything. If we stayed shut down, we wouldn't be functional. If we stayed agitated, we'd have hypertension and a heart attack, and that'd be it. So we're designed to move along the spectrum, but we're not taught how to self-direct that movement. We are left to our own devices to get stuck in a space along that spectrum because we don't know how to self-direct the movement. Neuroplasticity training teaches you how to self-direct along that spectrum. So you're allowed to be agitated when the situation warrants, but you know how to come back. You're allowed to shut down if that's the proper response to save your life, but then you know how to come back. It's not about not going in these directions. It's about knowing how to stay fluid. It's not about peace, joy, and love 100% of the time, because there are some times where you're going to need to run faster than you ever imagined if you'd like to live long enough to have more peace, joy, and love. So,
and all of that requires more consciousness, a higher level of awareness, the ability to recognize when it's needed to step in and change something, right?
Absolutely. And not just awareness combined with practices and tools that work.
Mm-hmm. So now share more about that. Share more about the solutions. I think that's enough of unless there's anything you want to add, I feel like that's enough of sort of the background, but tell us more about the solutions and that kind of thing. I'd love it.
The solutions are neuroplasticity training. And of course, I'm biased. I'm going to tell you neurosculpting is the solution I know best. So for me, the solution is learn a neurosculpting practice, which is a combination of mental and meditational practices and a lot of information about body level practices for nerve conditioning and self-regulation. But there are other great ones out there too. There's other forms of neuroplasticity trauma work training. There's, EMDR, there's EFT, there's DNRS, there's GUPTA, there's so many neural retraining programs. Some of them have their different nuances. The thing that makes ours very special is that it is very efficient, very powerful, and the practices don't take a whole lot of time. And we do a real combination of teaching around the information around the nervous system plus give practices. So that's the one I know best. But awareness isn't enough. You need a practice, and it has to be daily.
Right, right. The point about embodiment, the piece that you mentioned when you found your solution and that you're talking about that changes the brain, that literally changes the way the mind works, is adding the embodiment piece, right? There's something about it. And when you mentioned EMDR, which is the eye movement, what's the rest of that? Do you know the acronym?
I don't.
I know I've done EMDR, and it can be useful for trauma in its own way, right? And I'm sure all of them have limitations. But the embodiment piece seems to be the missing nugget of how to literally change the brain.
Yeah, and not all, most neuroplasticity training programs understand that when you get the motor cortex and the somatosensory cortex involved, combined with the cerebellum, which is all about movement, you amplify neuroplasticity. Again, this is a piece meditation does not have.
Right.
If you use the somatic senses, motion, movement, exercise, you actually amplify neuroplasticity. And if you know how and when to use it, then it is the physical body that helps the brain retrain as much as the brain helping the physical body retrain.
And thank you. There's the EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing. Yes, that is one modality. So I want to ask you about a term that's kind of out there these days. It's a little controversial, it's a little strange, but the term of mind control. And what that means to you, I think that there's negative ways that mind control occurs, and there's positive ways that it occurs, which is what we're talking about now with solutions. But there's even things like subliminal advertising in the media that is literally influencing your mind in ways that are so subtle you're not even aware of it. And there's, of course, all the stuff with, fake news and Facebook and algorithms and all of that, which really can subtly influence our behavior. And specifically, they were influencing elections with when they hired Cambridge Analytica, which is all outed in that Netflix documentary, The Great Hack, a few years ago. But talk about mind control a little bit.
My favorite subject. I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm just going to let me just set the stage. If you were to create your dating profile.
I'm listening.
Okay. What attributes do you put on there? You get very selective with the things you say about yourself. Why? Why do you get selective about the things you say about yourself on a dating profile? So that you could influence and sway someone else's perception of you. That's mind control. That's an attempt at mind control. So when we say mind control, over here is the perception of large-scale nefarious organizational mind control. Over here is the daily nefarious, unconscious, and or benign ways we all are trying to control each other's perceptions. It is called social connection. And it's a drive, it's a need of the prefrontal cortex to feel connected, accepted, seen, and heard by other. And that alone causes us to try to influence each other all the time. It's the root cause of white lies, pathological lying, manipulation, influence. I mean, even the greatest, what was it, the Dale Carnegie book that like changed the sales world forever, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mind control is not new, nor is it nefarious or benign. It's what human mammals do in order to get their needs met, which is to be part of a community, to be seen and heard. And that's going to cause us to either try to control our own behaviors to perform to a certain set of expectations, And if we can't do that, then I better change your set of expectations of me by telling you what I think it is you need and want to hear so that you keep me in your group. So that's like the overarching. But what I would also tell you is this. If you could master the art of self-directed neuroplasticity, you would realize two things. One, the entities you think are controlling you have far less control over you than you think they do, because you have self-directed neuroplasticity at your disposal. And two, if you had self-directed neuroplasticity practices, you would also realize that the response to taking sides, taking a stance, fighting a cause, all of these things, which can be very noble and very necessary for societal change, are also recruiting a very particular kind of brain dynamic, one in which we are midbrain dominant and frontal brain quiet. That dynamic, where we are taking a stance and fighting for a cause and protecting our own and fighting against an adversary, that is another way to say limbic functioning. And that comes with midbrain dominance. And when we're midbrain dominant, guess what we have a harder time accessing? Frontal brain attributes: compassion, love, forgiveness, joy, problem solving, elegant solutions, language, and logic. So what I will say now might be perhaps a little bit frustrating for people to hear. It's even frustrating for me to accept this. The more you dig into a stance, even if you think it's right. In fact, of course, you're going to dig into a stance when you think it's right. No one digs into a stance if they think they're wrong. So we know our stances come from us truly believing they're right. And a good portion of the time, that is a colossal waste of time and your energy, because it keeps you midbrain dominant. It keeps you perceiving more and more and more that you are disempowered. And it keeps you fighting harder and harder to reach for that empowerment.
Wow. Are you saying that what we're kind of going through right now in our culture and in our lives around even COVID and vaccines is that once we start to see the world in a certain way and we become kind of embedded in that worldview,
Mm-hmm.
the more we'll stay embedded in that worldview and unable to see another side, because of something going on in our brains, which is that it's very difficult to access the front brain, you said, which is where compassion lives, and what else? Say more about this. It's fascinating because this is happening right now in the world.
Yes, it's happening right now.
And it's causing these divisions, right? It's causing kind of a divided world, unfortunately. I think
Yes.
so.
So I can't say 100% of the time that this is what's happening, but majority, us and them mentality, black and white, us and them, right, wrong. Those things are generally expressions of a limbic self-protective brain dynamic. Here's what they do to you, the user, the end user. To hold and maintain those things, you are disabling the front of the brain to a certain capacity, which means you are not applying nearly the amount of logic you think you are. I can promise you that. You are not seeing all the solutions that you think you could. You are not seeing any gray zone whatsoever. You're missing critical information. You are keeping yourselves, ourselves, me, at a disadvantage. And that's just what you're doing to your perceptions. What you're doing to your body is 10 times worse. You are keeping stress hormones elevated. You are habituating even more strongly. to your negativity bias. You are compromising your gut health. You are elevating inflammation. You are not digesting your food and absorbing nutrients to your capacity. And you are absolutely causing neurodegenerative processes to start. It's a mess. It's a waste of time. It's a mess. But it's our natural default. Because we said earlier, as humans, we have negativity bias to keep us alive. So the minute that momentum starts, we get stuck in it. How do you fix that? How do you get out of it? You have to learn neuroplastically how to engage the prefrontal cortex. There are mechanisms to do so. There's physical processes. There are mental exercises to do it. Once you start engaging prefrontal activity, when you recruit focused attention in the front of the brain, it shows a minimizing effect on all of those midbrain processes, and attributes associated with frontal brain activity are things like joy, love, compassion, solutions, out of the box thinking, innovation, creativity, and the concept of a larger, more inclusive we, not an us and them. It's a very fine line between what is us and them and what is we. Inclusivity at a larger degree is prefrontally supported. Inclusivity at an exclusive expense, elitist, small we, us, that's midbrain. And even though they're similar concepts, they show up differently in our physiology. They show up differently in our worldview. And I know Her Many Voices is 1000% about creating the we of the women who have no voice. That cannot be done from a limbic place. That has to be done from a prefrontal place. So it's at the core of Her Many Voices' mission is to understand that happens when you are prefrontally predisposed.
So maybe you're doing this already. I see a need to even position your services and what you are teaching to the broader public in general right now because of the state of the world. Because of we're more things are more divisive than ever in my lifetime, frankly, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a real need for this kind of information on a really broad scale. Globally, not even just in the US, right? So have you positioned it that way or thought about that as it applies to what's happening right now today?
Yes, I mean, that certainly is my mission, is to make neurosculpting dinner table practices, right? To give it to every home, to get it to people who need it, because empowerment starts on the inside of your individual nervous system, period. You, and I'm saying this to you, right? Whoever is listening to me right now, as much as I'm saying it to you, I'm saying it to myself. You are the most powerful agent of change in your life, in your lifetime. It is you. And it is you governing your own nervous system with your own intention that holds the keys to the kingdom. When you do that, that is when you affect others around you more effortlessly, more organically, more authentically, without the need to fight or prove you right and them wrong, or to substantiate your argument with 10,000 articles. None of that is necessary if you have made the change first inside yourself, because it is absolutely non-negotiable when you are the change. This is why I can teach neurosculpting. This is why I can walk into a room of, police officers who I train, or even scientists or people who know far more than I do about neuroscience, and hold my own, because my change is irrefutable because it happened inside me.
I love this. You're telling us how to get to the point where each and every individual can be the kind of person to one of those people. I mean, I think of it as Christ consciousness, even where you walk into the room and you're just so deeply balanced, rooted, grounded, content, don't get upset. One of those, it's like a life-changing thing where you become one of those people, right?
I mean, think about this. If you could get so regulated, self-directed, regulated in yourself, where nothing is truly a threat unless someone's holding a knife to your throat, right? Truly, someone else's opinion is not a threat. If you're that regulated and you could walk into a room full of people who think completely differently from you, and you could walk in regulated, in compassion, and in love, that's a game changer. That's a different conversation. That's a different outcome. This is how people have converted KKK members to leave the brotherhood. This is how, people have converted hate groups to change their ways. It's because they were regulated enough in themselves to walk in without that limbic response and hold a prefrontal space of compassion to see someone else. Perhaps that person is seen for the very first time and feels it. And now their arguments don't need to be so heavy either.
That's a whole nother thing, being seen.
It's a whole other thing.
In general, are not seen.
That's what the divisive arguments are about right now. See me, see me, see me. And the other side saying, well, if I see you, that means I must be wrong. So seeing you negates me being seen. That's all this is. Wow. And it doesn't matter what you call the argument. You could call it the Cold War. You could call it COVID. You could call it oil versus greenhouse effect. You could call it whatever you want. It's about see me, and the threat of me actually seeing you means I'm negated, and that only comes from dysregulation. But when you are regulated, you see yourself, you feel whole, you don't need anyone else to see you. You just show up, and they can feel that.
I feel that from you every time I see you. And I had absolutely, and I have, well, and Alicia too, by the way. And I have a suspicion that when, having gone through 30 years of these extreme seizures and serious debilitating issues, and then I also was at Nurture, I don't know, when was that, a year ago? And you were dancing, remember?
That's right.
And I see there's so much joy in you as well. I love it. You're an embodiment of these practices. I really, really want you to know that.
Someone else said this to me the other day. She was a child of Middle Eastern trauma. And she said, I feel bad for the people who never went through war because they're so afraid of life. And that made so much sense to me because I thought, I have literally flatlined on multiple occasions. I really was not coming back. And that does something to you. It does one of two things. It either creates excessive fear in your life of it happening again, or it makes you have the felt sense that there is no tomorrow. And if there's no tomorrow, then how much can I love today? And I don't want to be doom and gloom because I don't view it as doom and gloom. I view it as fuel. But I'm going to tell you, you don't have tomorrow. I don't care who you are, what research you have, or how much clout you have in the world. You don't have tomorrow. You're lucky if you get it. Love today. That's it. That's it.
That's the message of a lot of people who've gone through, as you mentioned, flatlining, people who've gone through near-death experiences. Their message is exactly that, right?
Life is too damn short for this ridiculous arguing. Mammals with the same nervous system, the same brain, arguing with each other about who's got the answers to the universe when we could be loving and expanding and getting to our deathbed, looking back. Nobody cares how many arguments they won. Nobody. They
Absolutely.
only care that they left their loved ones with a sense of being loved.
Yeah. And then, and I know Anita Morjani is someone who had a near-death experience, and one of her additional message is, in addition to living in the present and don't counting on tomorrow, and another message she has is that you have to do what you love, be authentic, be who you are. Don't live your life for other people, live it for who you are, essentially. And that sounds easier than it is, I think, in the real world. Yeah. Also, being in the present, right? I have a wonderful son who is he has autism, and he's actually right here. Sometimes I'm muting myself and I'm talking to him in the background because it's a snow day and he's working online, right? Anyway, talk about living in the present is the biggest gift, because I am living in the present all the time, because that's how he lives.
He brings his genius to you.
Totally. It's such a blessing.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So before we go to any questions and kind of start to wrap up, we have about 10 more minutes. I wanted to ask you about your book, New Beliefs, New Brain. If you could share about that. It's free. The subtitle is Free Yourself from Stress and Fear.
Yes.
New Beliefs, New Brain.
So that was my first book, and I was so blessed to have Dr. David Perlmutter write the foreword to that book. He is one of my all-time favorite teachers of life. And that book is really an entry point for people who want to understand a little bit more about the nervous system and neuroplasticity. And it's got some case studies and practices. And it speaks a lot to trauma and how to overcome it. And then I have a bunch of books after that that take that thread and run deeper into more of the exploratory neuroscience behind some of the practices, and all sorts of rich resources in the books. And that's a great entry point. And especially, and if people like Audible, I have a bunch of books on Audible, because sometimes it's just nice to listen, and people prefer that. But those books are great entry points. And but what's even better is learning, and that's my specialty. And so that's what I always love to do, is get involved with my students. And we have online courses, they're self-paced, and we have live courses, and really that's where the rubber meets the road. You want to make the changes, you learn the principles and the practices, and then you do them.
That's great. You also have a children's book, right?
I do. It's called The Monster Under Your Bed is Just a Story in Your Head. And this one teaches neuroliteracy to children. It teaches children how to recognize what's going on with their thoughts versus their experience, their felt sense of fear. It teaches them how to use practices to regulate themselves and to add self-directed perception to their life, so they feel more empowered at a younger age. And that one is actually, it's not just for kids, it's for grown-ups too. I mean, who doesn't love a good kid story that teaches you about your brain?
Well, that's just what I was thinking, is that it's relevant for all of us, right? That monster under your bed, whatever you're worried about, it's just a story in your head. Absolutely.
And caveat, that's not to minimize the trauma any of you have experienced, or any of my trauma. The things that caused the trauma, those really happened. Those are not to be erased or minimized. It is the relationship we choose to have with that event that makes or breaks us. And that's what I mean by it's just a story in your head, not to minimize some terrible thing that might have happened to you, but to give you the empowerment that you can turn that event into something that lives in the past.
And, I also love the, you might be familiar with the newer documentary by Dr. Gabor Mate called The Wisdom of Trauma. Mm-hmm. It's just really an incredible look at, it's a different way of looking at trauma, mm-hmm. At not just a teacher, but it's really an incredible look at trauma.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with that. I haven't watched it yet, but there was a question, what can people do right now? Mm-hmm. Couple things. Number one, don't expect to be extra loving if you don't sleep well at night. So rule number one, work on your sleep patterns and get them regulated. Try to sleep at night, be awake during the day. Another tip people can do is when you are hijacked by stress, when you're in divisive arguments online or in person, when you're shut down, if you could shake your body very vigorously for just a few moments, you can actually interrupt that whole process and keep it from gaining momentum. So sleep, shaking, and then a meditation practice. And even if you don't have one, that could be a 5-minute walk around your neighborhood while you are listening to some beautiful music or just being quiet. But these are tools for life. They're simple, they're free. You can do them.
That's great. Here's another question. For someone with alcohol and food addiction or habits, what is one of the first things we can do in this neuroplasticity work to overcome it? Awareness is not enough.
Correct. Awareness is not enough. And addiction is very real and very efficient and very powerful. I do have an Audible program called Neurosculpting for habits, breaking habits. And that program actually has some practices in there that I have used with my clients who have very strong addictions. So I've dealt with opioid addiction and heroin addiction and alcohol and sexual addiction in my private practice. And so some of those meditations in that Audible program are directly for helping your dopamine entrainment separate itself from the substance. So I think that could be real supportive. That's on Audible.
That is awesome. That sounds good. One more comment. Here's just some more information about neurosculpting.
Yes. Yeah, that Audible program that you just mentioned, the step-by-step program, that one's pretty robust. It addresses neuroplasticity practices for different aspects of life, relationship, finances, stress, trauma. So that one on Audible is a great entry point as well.
I wanted to ask you, and we're bringing Lisa Fall back in, and wanted to ask you, my last question for you, Lisa, really is related to Her Many Voices. How did you become involved in the first place? And maybe it was through the Refugee Ambassador Program?
It was actually before that. So, I got the honor of watching Alicia create it. I got to see Alicia have her mission and her purpose and watched her birth it powerfully into the world. And the first time she went to Haiti and experienced so much, she came back and she said, who helps the helpers? Who helps the relief workers? And so we actually did some sessions to give the relief workers some tools so that they could stay resilient enough to do that kind of work. And then from there, as she was getting more and more out there in the world, that's when we came up with the ambassador program. Yeah.
Wonderful. Alicia, welcome back.
Thank you. It's been wonderful listening. I've been smiling, shaking my head, laughing, having all sorts of memories.
I get Lisa, so passionate.
What's that?
I get so passionate and fired up.
You do get so passionate. That's what, one of the many, many reasons why I absolutely fell in love with who you are. And I thought, okay, this is my bud, man.
Yes.
I've got, here's somebody who's part of my peeps. What did you say, 18 years ago?
Yes. Oh my God.
It's because of that passion. And you have been one of the few people that in my life who truly have moved your passions to purpose for the betterment of others, as well as yourself.
That's
you do that on a regular
hope.
basis.
Thank you.
You've done it on a regular basis. And you've truly, it's helped me in keeping that grounding. It's close to 3 years now, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. I woke up one morning and I had been dragging for a couple of weeks. And I woke up one morning and I thought, okay, I need some caffeine in me or something. And I went into the kitchen and I had the coffee grounds in one hand and the French press in the other. And suddenly I was out. I collapsed.
Yeah.
And I ended up with a nice concussion and I ended up breaking my back. And what I didn't realize also is that I was out for 90 minutes. When we found out the last call I had made and the next call I made. And when I went to the hospital, when I got to the ER, they told me that it was the vasovagal syncope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll get you.
And I'm like, Lisa, that immediate, Oh my God. Yeah. All right. That's
Yeah.
what she was talking about for those 30 years. This is
Yeah.
what she's going through.
Yeah,
You know.
it was powerful. And of course, you have always dealt with a large amount of stress just in the work that you do in the world and the things you've overcome in your own life, that it's not surprising that at some point your nervous system is going to get overloaded. And that's
Mhm.
what that response is. It's an overwhelming overload. And it's trying to hit the reset button.
Yeah.
We have one more question. I'd love to squeeze
Yes.
in one more question here. I know we're really wrapping up with our last few
Yeah.
minutes, but someone with mental illness diagnosis can see life differently. Is your program any different in its application to deal with that population?
Tamara, that's a great question. I'll caveat and say I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. We do have therapists on staff, and we do have a number of practitioners who are dual licensed in neurosculpting and therapy. And in those cases, they can speak very specifically to diagnoses. What I will say is when I get clients who have diagnoses, I absolutely make sure that before I do neurosculpting with them, that they inform their doctors and their therapists. And if their doctors or therapists have an issue and think it's not a good place to be, I'm going to back up. I haven't really experienced a lot of pushback. We're very transparent with their caregivers. And in fact, most of them say this is helping as an adjunct to their therapy. So I can't really speak to the diagnosis part of it. Other than that, yeah.
Thank you
But
so much.
I want to just jump in quickly and say you have your advisory board, right? Or not advisory, your board.
Yeah.
There are some powerful women on that board.
Yes,
in the medical realm.
We just put the board together this year, and we have a fantastic MD who's also very much versed in alternative medicine, and we have a mental wellness PhD at the Anschutz Medical Center who's in charge of public mental health and research. And then we have a neuroscientist who also deals with behavioral and somatic approaches. So the board, it's a solid board, and it's all empowered women, which is also really, really cool.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry we have to wrap up. I know we always hate to go here.
That's great.
Please notice the link below, the bit.ly link for donating to Her Many Voices. We certainly appreciate it. I know that many of you know how important this work is in the world. Alicia, do you want to speak a little bit about what we have coming up for our February event, which is February 10th?
Yeah, so last month we were trying to get Jessica Xu on from, Jessica's working out of Haiti. She's been down there for the last 20 years. Lisa, is another New Yorker.
Yes.
But unfortunately, because we had some tech issues with Haiti, we weren't able to get Jess on last month. So she's going to be joining us again this coming month. And Jess's background is she's into anthropology. And she's been working in Haiti, like I said, for the last 20 years. She's got that inside take on what is going on with the country, how people are dealing, and speaking about trauma and PTSD and all of those kind of things. I don't know if you're aware, Haiti just had another earthquake just yesterday morning.
Oh my God.
So between earthquake after earthquake, the assassination of their president, the gangs that are running the country, the insight that Jess can bring to what's going on in the country is powerful. It really is. So she'll be back with us on the 10th of February. Hopefully we'll have, stellar tech moments here and not have any more issues. So please join us on that date. And Liz, thanks again for being here today.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you, Alicia, for everything you do as well.
Thank you, Myrna.
Thank you so much.